Get this crazy war ended now. If I were president, I'd be able to negotiate an end to this horrible and rapidly escalating war within 24 hours.
Why is Trump saying that? Because Donald Trump knows what I'm about to tell you, that the CIA have completed their coup in Ukraine. It's been a coup a while in the making, folks. But the CIA's coup to pull the plug on Biden's war came to a spectacular end with a spectacular helicopter crash which took place in Ukraine. The crash not only killed Ukraine's head of state security, but also his 2 deputies. The crash which killed this key Zelensky advisor is portrayed internationally as still having a mysterious origin, but this was a CIA move, and this was an attention getter because it was followed by a wave of sackings across Ukraine as government head, department heads and regional government were all replaced. The mangled rotor blades buried in the front of the apartment building were a plain signal that there is a new power in town. And who might that power be? Let's wind the clock back a few days before that happened. Just 5 days before the helicopter crash, which signalled this purge of the Ukrainian government, the CIA director had held a secret meeting with Zelensky on allegedly Russia's next steps. The Washington Post says the meeting came at a critical juncture in the war. Yeah, the critical juncture where we know that they've lost, and now we have to figure out what we're going to do about it. Not only that, but while Burns was in Kiev, he also met with Ukrainian intelligence officials. Yeah, I just bet he did. You clearly would want to think of the Ukrainian intelligence now as a wholly owned subsidiary of the CIA in the same way as the ISI in Pakistan is a wholly owned subsidiary. But they still need old Zelensky, you know. So within days, Boris is over visiting with him just to show how, hey, you know, we still need you, dude, and don't you worry. Everything's good. Yeah. That's absolutely right. They still do need him, you see. They need somebody as a front man to sell this SHYT. They always need that. And so he's still useful, and so that's the game that's going on. But he's now captured their boy, and there's a whole new regime in charge. Reminds me of South Vietnam. And as if to emphasize the captured nature of Zelensky, one of the homes raided in this new countrywide crackdown on corruption which is going on in Ukraine is the home of Kolomoisky. Kolomoisky, the guy, the media empire guy who was the guy who created Zelensky. His offices were also raided as part of this corruption crackdown, in inverted commas, which is also useful for the window dressing, because these developments come as the Ukraine's president prepared for an EU summit on Friday in Kiev to discuss the country's potential accession to the bloc of 27 member states. And of course, making sure there was no corruption in the country would be very important if you were joining the EU. Yeah, according to a leaked draft statement, the EU will encourage the Ukraine to meet the European Commission's demands, including dealing with corruption, and will then move on to decide all future conditions. Is that to be the consolation prize then? You know, you can get into the EU, you'll never be in NATO, we'll lose the war, but hey, we let you in the EU, start clearing out the corruption now. In 2 years, you could have Ukraine in the EU, according to some speculation. But there's no speculation in this article in Politico. If you can read between the lines, in fact, you don't even have to read between the lines, you just have to read the actual lines themselves. They tell the whole story. And this, as I say, is from Politico. It says that Ukrainian forces are unlikely to be able to recapture Crimea from Russian troops in the near future, 4 senior Defence Department officials told the House Armed Services Committee lawmakers in a classified briefing. The assessment is sure to frustrate leaders in Kiev who consider taking the peninsula back one of their signature goals. That's genuflection to the existing paradigm. We're unlikely to be able to recapture Crimea. Yeah, I'd agree. Are unlikely. I don't think we need 4 senior Defence Department officials to tell us that. So what are they telling us? They're telling us that there are lots of Ukraine that they're unlikely to be able to recapture. Get it? Lots of Ukraine. Now, that assessment, which is coming out from the briefing, which is now being reported, remember this is all signalling, echoes what General Mark Milley, the Joint Chiefs Chair, has alluded to in recent weeks. He said, I maintain that for this year it will be very, very difficult to militarily eject the Russian forces from every inch of Ukraine and occupied or Russian-occupied Ukraine, he said during a meeting of the Ukraine contact group. That doesn't mean it can't happen, doesn't mean it won't happen, but it'd be very, very difficult. That's twice you said very, very difficult. That means impossible. So that's another message. And it's not about, it's not just about Crimea, it's about occupied territories and how very, very difficult it would be to take them back. Are you starting to get the message of the spin here? What's been said, even though it's not said, but it's being half said in the usual way you soften up public opinion. Zelensky administration was furious, according to one person familiar with thinking in Kiev, as if anyone gave a rat's ass what the Ukrainians thought about anything. And then, as if these four department people and General Mark Milley isn't enough for you, we also have the House Armed Services Chair Mike Rogers in an interview Wednesday that the war needs to end this summer, placing urgency on the US to rapidly supply Ukraine for a coming offensive on Kiev and forge a clear outline of how the conflict ends. So that's it, arm them up with as much as we can in order to minimize how bad this is going to be, and then we'll see how bad does it end up being. Now, Rogers also said Vladimir Putin has got to decide what he can leave with and claim victory. What is doable, he said. What is doable? That's a catastrophic statement. What is doable? You're doomed when you hear people saying, well, let's start thinking about what's doable. Because what's doable means that your airy-fairy notions ain't going to work out, right? And what's doable isn't agreed on yet. So I think there's going to have to be some pressure from our government and NATO leaders with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky about what does victory look like. Why, say, shooting down a few helicopters. Would you constitute that as pressure? Well, I think I would, yeah. And I think that's going to help us, more than anything, to drive Putin and Zelensky to the table and end this thing this summer. Putin never had any problem coming to the table, as long as this time he gets it signed in blood. It's Zelensky. It's not just Zelensky, that's just code word for the remaining problem, which we now have in Ukraine. The remaining problem, now that you're seeing the lie of the land laid out there. The problem is the Azovs, the hardcore, the crazies, the ones still committed, the ones still fighting the glorious battle. The monster they've created. The ones that Uncle Joe was so happy to go over and be photographed with in Ukraine when they were stirring the SHYT over there. Somebody's got to take care of them. Somebody's got to take them out. Who's going to do it? Except Vladimir. And that's what's going to happen. And a few tanks here or there are going to make absolutely no difference to that. And there's going to be no more substantial intervention than that. So, but it does look as if the only positive to the forthcoming carnage is that it will be short-lived rather than protracted over 2 years, which would shove us well in excess of 1 million casualties. So they're pulling the plug on Uncle Joe's war. It's time to wind it down and move on. And they've already pivoted to China and the threat of the big China balloon. The propaganda emphasis already shifting to China, which is in any event the next and always sanctioned target of the neocons. They're like a Rottweiler. Trump has spoken about this. He used John Bolton like a Rottweiler at meetings to scare the out of people. And that's exactly what's going on. They're moving on to target China. And Uncle Joe will be blamed for this. It will be Biden's Ukraine war, just like it was Nixon's Vietnam War. And just as Nixon was taken out by the CIA for their own reasons, Biden has been taken out by, well, who else? Who else? But this dude here, you should know, by the way, that this is really who's in charge. This guy is the guy who's in charge in Washington, D.C. He's the heir to George Bush Sr., who also was very good at being quietly in charge behind the scenes, even when he wasn't president. All right, that's it for this edition of The Beautiful Truth. If you like that, then do click like, because it helps offset the outrageous suppression of this channel. And if you like the content in general, subscribe. You might never see me again. The algorithms might just bury me and you'd never hear from me. But this has been Fintan Dunn reporting for The Beautiful Truth on the 5th of February 2023. And I'll be back with more soon. I hope you'll join me from that. But in the meantime, for breakfornews.com and informedconsent.ie, this has been Fintan Dunn reporting. See you soon.